senses of humor than women, Rich Briner.
Raise your hand if you remember and tell jokes well. 1, 2, 3. 3 out of 8. Usually out of 4. 4 out of 8. That's pretty good. Usually in a crowd of 100 people, 3 or 4 people out of 100 raise their hand, remembering and telling jokes well. Okay, raise your hand if you feel like you have a good sense of humor. Everybody except David. Almost everybody, like 98% of the people in a group of 100 people, 98 of them raise their hand and say they've got a good sense of humor. So what does this prove? It proves that having a good sense of humor has little to do with remembering and telling jokes well. We pride the people who are spontaneous and can bring about a spirit of fun at work. You know, humor at work is like spice. A little bit goes a long way. And sometimes researchers tell us that in the workplace, it's more important to have fun, to be playful, as long as it doesn't get in the way of doing the job, than it is to be funny. So some of the things to be thinking about. Who do you know at work who has a spirit of playfulness about them, who can have fun and have that attitude, which is extremely important, more so even than being able to remember and tell jokes. I mean, that's great. That's one part of humor. Okay, with that in mind, guys, gals, we begin our panel. I'll introduce each person just before they take the stage, and at the end we will have an opportunity for everybody in the room to do a 60-second table topic. So you'll speak to the green light, and Matt is up here with the timing. So we should have everyone in the room having participated today, except those who have jobs. All right, here we go. Our first panelist, Tracy Tomich. He's been a Toastmaster and a theater technician for 6 years. Over his 50-year-long work history, he has had more women bosses than men. He is currently working with 70 women from all over the world at the Child Development Center at Malmstrom Air Force Base. He has learned to control his toxic masculinity by using humor and keeping his big mouth shut. Our first panelist today, Tracy Tomich.
Thank you, Rich. I have discovered, contrary to maybe your research, that women have better senses of humor than men. I really do, especially theater women. Now, what I do, most of my theater or funny stuff you see on Facebook, I get from women. Because once I realize I'm bouncing material off of them on CDC, they come back fast, and we have a basic rule. They can use what I use, and I can use what they use, so it's not stealing. Good example is one of the big, I'm not using their name, powerful women over there, does all the bureaucracy. I told her, you know, Santa can't come Christmas with Cassie because Santa didn't put in the right paperwork. And she goes, red tape, don't you just love it? It's hard to cut through, especially with flies. Then there's the other one. Mr. Tracy, parents who get angry with their children. Yes, do you have a box with holes in it? I'm going to ship this one off to its dad's station in Japan. Okay? Or, hey, Trace, can you hide a body? This one's not going to live to 4 years old. that's just a small part of it. And I have a thing on men's brain. You got food, sex, family, dogs, hunting, fishing, stuff like that. Wife's at the end. And then we got women's brain, which, if I get to it, everything. And with that, I will be quiet.
Thank you, Tracy. Our second panelist today, Deborah Jenkins, doesn't proclaim to have a great sense of humor, but she has a little bit of a twisted sense of humor for sure. At least she cracks herself up.
Rich asked me to give my opinion on who has a better sense of humor, men or women. He gave me plenty of time to think of this. So my twisted mind is very analytical, and I took every word seriously. He asked about sense of humor, not who's funnier, who has a better sense of humor. So what does a person do? They Googled it, and I discovered that sense of humor really is the ability to find humor in everyday activity, to appreciate a joke. It's not to tell a joke and to be funny, but it is to appreciate it. So with that said, I wondered, what does the word better mean? Does that mean good, or does that mean greater, a larger sense of humor? So here's an example of what brought me to my conclusion, which I'll share at the end. When I say that Tracy likes to toot his own horn, 9 out of 10 of you men are thinking, you're visualizing him farting out of a trumpet. Yes. 9 out of 10 of us women are thinking, oh, guys, that's not funny at all. So with that said, I firmly believe that men have a better sense of humor than women.
Okay, and that's not tooting your own horn either. Okay, thank you, Deborah. Our third speaker today, Jake Sorich. He will argue that while women have the capacity to be just as funny as men, they are often discouraged from doing so. Using data discovered from a study from 2015, here he is, Mr. Jake Sorich.
All right, well, like a guy, I see what's in front of me, and I see who's funnier, so I think of who's funnier versus who has a better sense of humor. Like I said, I did some research, and I found an Atlantic article, and they asked who's funnier. And what they did, someone looked at who's my professor. It's a random, you can rate your college professor. And they did a search with humor. And they found that often the woman professor wasn't even on the chart because it was not something that women professors were often, I guess, not something that's valued in women professors. But then one professor in particular did some research, and they had, those New Yorker captions or those cartoons that you see that usually aren't very funny. Those, they had people write random captions, and then they would rate which one's the funniest. And they found that 0.11% men were funnier than women. So barely, just barely funnier. And then they took it further, and then they had men and women, they had pictures of men and pictures of women, and then they had a funny joke placed on the picture. And then they asked, okay, which one do you value more? And the women valued the funnier men more than the men valued the funnier women. And so I think what kind of comes down to is that men don't care if women are funny. It's kind of what it comes down to. And women, on the other hand, do very much care if a man is funny. So I think it's basically. And another thing in that study they found, when women are amongst a group of women, they find that women feel more comfortable to be funny than if women and men are mixed company. So that's what I found.
Thank you, Jake. And our fourth panelist today for the battle of the sexes. Do men have better senses of humor than women? The year is 2019, and sadly, we are still burdened with sexism and the oppression of women by those who should know better. Thankfully, women do know better and continue to shine our radiant feminine energy with classy determination. I didn't like this. It's time to enlighten those who still cling to sexual stereotypes and gender discrimination. Our panelist, Lori Eckhart, is prepared to do battle. Ladies and gentlemen, our soldier in disguise, Lori Eckhart.
Do men have better senses of humor than women? Men are funnier, if you ask a man. How would men actually know if women are funnier? Because they rarely actually listen to them. Let's just be honest. When men are with women, their attention is elsewhere. Men do try to impress women with humor to compensate for shortcomings. If men think they're funnier, perhaps they don't have the capacity to understand a woman's humor. Maybe they have bigger issues. While I applaud the many men who have overcome prejudice, the perception is that men are funnier, and it's an outdated cultural wise. Think back to grade school. The class clown was an annoying little boy trying to get attention, making farting noises under his armpit. Well, he may have gotten a reprimand. The attitude was, well, boys will be boys. Whereas if a girl did the same thing, it would be highly frowned upon as unladylike. However, smart girls didn't let this make them less funny. They just developed a more mature and sophisticated sense of humor. In the stereotype, 50 years ago when stand-up comic came to be, there were very few women in comedy. It was considered a man's field. But think back to Lucille Ball, Phyllis Diller, Joan Rivers, many others, Carol Burnett, who were extremely funny despite this. And today, there are so many women comedians who are just killing it on the stage. Sarah Silverman, Amy Poehler, Amy Schuler, Tina Fey. They are smart, edgy, intelligent, and they are hilarious. So, no, humor is not linked to testosterone. Laughter is the magical music of our souls. And I believe that Toastmasters will overcome this nonsense and realize we're here every Wednesday morning to laugh our tushies off.
Thank you, distinguished panel. And now we are going to table topics. For those of you who don't have a job today, we are going to call on you and have you answer the question. 60 seconds. Speak to the green light.
We're going to vote on the best speaker of these four, right?
Yes. Yes, and you might want to do that right at this moment.
For the men in the room, the women are able to do two things at once, so you could keep going.
Okay. All righty. Too bad I don't need to call on you. All right, our first table topic participant giving his or her answer to the question, do men have better senses of humor than women? David.
Dang. See, I was hoping about preoccupied looking away. So Rich came to me on Monday, because I'm doing this panelist deal today. He's like, you should show up. So I want to prove that men are funnier than women. Something got really cold in the room. It got really quiet after you said that. So I got thinking, I'm not the funniest guy. I usually tell a joke and then it's quiet. That sounds, it's a little cold room, like this happened on Monday. And I usually just follow a joke that caught. I usually quit my day job, and all of a sudden then someone laughs. So I took it on myself today to kind of look around the room, and I've been judging every single one of you. And so I was looking to see, as far as who's making the most jokes and how people are responding. And what I found was that men, we had about 5 guys in the room that just had over 50% of the room laughing at one given point in time, whereas only 3 women in the room had more than 50% of the room laughing. Now you can say that it's biased because there's more men here than women. Sure, I get that. So take it as you like. Another thing I noticed is that when someone made a joke, the men were usually more boisterous, deep down the gut, a good, nice, solid laugh, whereas the women were like, ha, ha. That's funny. It's more quiet, kind of push laugh. Watch how it goes. It might change. I'll stop at that.
Thank you, David. Do men have better senses of humor than women? Jessica.
Here, man.
Okay. Thank you. That goes to the side of men who have better senses of humor. Okay, let's move on to Christy.
I thought about this quite a bit because I couldn't find anything funny about it. But I looked at things like I have a scotoma here that is based on past relationships. And I think that I can psychoanalyze men in saying that they don't want to feel sad or anything other than angry. So when they have a feeling, they laugh instead. And you'll see this in little boys and stuff that just start making jokes. They'll sit there, if somebody's got the computer monitor a little bit crooked, and it's funny. And they crack up laughing, and they can't quit laughing. Where women look for a little more substance behind the joke, you know, the inside story and the lead-in. And so I think there is a big difference between males and females. Now, as far as who's funnier, I would agree with Lori. It's simply some people are funny and some people aren't.
Thank you, Christy. Do men have better senses of humor than women? Jerry.
I've been waiting for this one.
I'm here with my boss. So I think we're a product of our environment, as all of you have implied already this morning. But I think of my military career, where it was a male-oriented society. You went to the club with mostly men. And I think men are jokesters and storytellers, but we're most funny to men.
as we've heard. Women don't really get what we're talking about or maybe appreciate what we see. But I think we look at the night show hosts are all men. The women are on during the day while the men are working. But anyway, I think
It's because we
we've all
don't get
talked
paid
about
enough.
research.
Sorry.
Research indicates that men mostly enter humorous contests. I'm not saying that women aren't funny, but they do it because they enjoy it, I guess. So my last statement is, in conclusion, men generally have a greater sense of humor than women, and that's a fact check.
Thank you, Jerry. Patrick, do men have better senses of humor than women?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is, as a fact, yes, men like me is funnier than women like my girlfriend. That's good. That's good. Yes, men is funny with than women because I don't ever heard a joke from women. There's I say a few jokes on YouTube and on commercials. Mostly, here's a pun. I found a pun on commercial, and it's a cereal commercial. I forget what kind of cereal, but it goes like this. There's a daughter and the father. The dad is wearing a bright yellow coat, and so the daughter is just eating cereal, and when she saw her dad, she said, "Man, that's one bald yellow coat." It's like, really? Thank you. If you're a banana. And the dad says, "Well, I find that very appealing."
So, we have about 2 minutes in which you can ask questions to any of our panel members. David.
Jay, from your research, would you say that women are funnier on paper and men are funnier out loud?
If women are funnier on paper and men are funnier out loud. You know, there might be something to that. The research didn't really go into it, but I think that if you look at comedians, like male and female comedians, you look at someone like Jim Carrey, who's very much a expressive comedian, and then you look at someone like Sarah Silverman, who's very much a kind of a verbal comedian. So, you know, there might be something to that. I don't know if there's been any research done on that, but that's an interesting theory. You know, it might be. You have to look into it, I guess, to really know for sure. So maybe we'll do that research.
Last question, go ahead.
Deborah, I tend to not like to gas the vehicle up all of the time, and sometimes I run it quite low. If I run out of gas and think, that's just funny, and Jerry doesn't, who's right?
I can leave the room if you want.
This is an obvious answer that everybody could get, so thank you for giving me the easy question. Obviously, you are correct, and he is just not having a very good sense of humor to the funny situation. So, as I said before, I firmly believe that men have a greater sense of humor in finding things funny. However, women obviously are funnier than men. That's just an obvious statement. So, yes, you trump, Jerry. Sorry, Jerry.
Okay, quick final question.
I don't have a question. I would just maybe suggest to Joan that if Jerry's not finding that funny, he obviously hasn't had enough practice. So perhaps you could run that gas down a few more times to get him in the mood to laugh.
There's just always call Uber. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Tracy, you wanna run on?
Real
Yeah,
quick,
I'm on my
John.
6th pair of shoes this year.
I have a question for the panelists. This is for our Lori. Understanding that biology plays a role in people's sense of humor, are there certain times, maybe parts of the month possibly, where it's become more
Well,
shortage.
Okay, I have 2 teenage daughters, so I can kind of relate to that. Well, one's not a teenager anymore. But I would just say that be careful at certain times. So what type of humor you choose to present.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's thank our panel. I have a test to really determine who has the better sense of humor in terms of reacting to humor. I'm about to tell a joke, and we will see whether the men in the audience laugh harder than the women. And so here it goes. Some of you may have heard this joke already, but this is a test. A man is sitting at the breakfast table eating his breakfast. He's got a newspaper in his hand. Suddenly his wife comes in the door and she says she's just been to the doctor. She says, the doctor just gave me the most magnificent news, Bertram. Bertram lowers the newspaper and says, well, what was that? He says I have the most magnificent bosom that he has ever seen. Bertram says, well, what did he say about your fat ass? She said, your name never came up in the Well, it looks like the women were applauding as well as laughing. So it seems to me that, at least today, women do have better senses of humor than men. And I'd like to leave you with this statement. When you die and you go up to heaven, St. Peter is meeting you at the pearly gates. And he's trying to determine whether to let you in or not. If you have used your sense of humor well, people inside the walls will be out yelling, let him in, Lord, he's a lot of fun. Or, let her in, Lord, she's a lot of fun. That's my wish for you. This is a God-given gift, a sense of humor. It's ours to use whenever we choose. Just remember that a person without a sense of humor is like a wagon without springs, jolted by every pebble in the road. Mr. Toastmaster.